but thank you all for coming out tonight.
You should count down a couple times.
It drives you crazy. I don't know why. All right, we are about to go live in 3, 2. What is up, everybody? Welcome to Comic Book Club. I'm Alex.
I'm Pete.
And we are coming to you live from a couple of places on the good old internet. We are live on YouTube. We're live on Crowdcast. We are unlive on iTunes, Android, Spotify, Stitcher, or the podcast app of your choice. But however you watch or listen, thank you so much for doing it. We have a great show for you tonight that I'm very excited to roll out. Later on in the show, Sal Crivelli is going to be here. I know there's a couple of, what do you guys call them, population are over in the YouTube comments. They're representing. Hello to everybody over there. But before we get into it, there's something we should talk about, Pete. We should talk about tonight's drink, tonight's special drink that we all made, which I'm very excited about. So, Pete, every week on the show, what do you drink?
I drink what I have in front of me. You know what I mean? Like I say, okay, what do I got in the old fridge? And what can I add booze to? And
got some, you got some
and
whipped cream,
a lot
add some
of people,
booze to it. You
exactly.
got some hummus, add some booze to it.
That's right. You don't get picky.
Yeah, that's called a hummus Collins.
Yeah, well, and it's nice, in our Slack, people, talking about drinks, making drinks, Stray Bullies, our own chef who's unbelievable.
Well, we should talk about this. So Stray Bullet, a.k.a. Brett Macris, is the official chef of Comic Book Club. He is also a real-life chef de cuisine at Bouchon down in New Orleans. And he thought, hey, maybe we could... Oh, Cochon. Did I say Bouchon? Cochon.
You did.
Sorry about that, Stray Bullet. Anyway, he thought he could plus up your regular Vodka Collins, Vodka Palmer, right?
Yeah.
Vodka Palmer. So you were doing like an Arnold Palmer with a little vodka in it, or like a little Arnold Palmer and a lot of vodka. One of the two, either way.
Well, one of the,
Yeah, but he came up with his own recipe to make a fancier version of it. Stray Bullet, I don't know if it's okay with you if I share it. You can just say so if I share it with the class here.
Share it with the class.
Yeah, do it. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to share it here, and then we'll get into the comics talk after we get to this. But this is the drink that he designed for you, Pete. So this is, you take 2 ounces of vodka, an ounce of limoncello, which we got from another one of the recipes. Well, we got it. You also, I'm sure, got it, Pete, because we were making these recipes from
So I go to a liquor store and I say, excuse me, can I have limoncello? And they're going to be like, get out.
Yeah, they'll hand you like a tiny little lemon with strings on it that you can go like this.
Oh,
and it
nice.
makes a very deep noise. I'm a dad. 1 ounce of lemon juice, half an ounce simple syrup. And what you do is you take it, you mix it all together over ice. Then you strain it into a cool glass with ice. And then you pour iced tea over it. And then you garnish with a candied lemon wedge, which he also gave directions on how to do that.
Yeah, and
but I got it right here. I made it with some black tea. It is a very refreshing summer drink.
Ooh, you look so fancy.
There you go. It's very nice. Pete, how was yours when you definitely made this special drink that Brett specifically designed?
So what I did, which is a little different, and I appreciate Brett Macris is a legend. What I did was I took the vodka that I had and then dumped all of it into a glass. And then I decided how much lemonade I wanted to drink and then kind of poured that until I was like, that's enough lemonade. And then I stirred it with one, chopstick, but whatever you got around, you can get a stick, whatever.
Just use like a stick out of the woods,
you can
like a witch's cauldron,
a broom, and over your knee, and just kind of use that to stir.
Sure.
Whatever you're into.
Now, I texted you before the show, Pete.
Yeah.
Right. And I said, hey, are you going to make the Pete Palmer? It's as it's been named, as requested. Everybody would love for you to see you try it. And you said, I appreciate the love, but I can't run around asking for shit I don't want. And I said, I can pay for the other liquors if you want to have them sent directly to you.
But it would go to waste. Because...
And then you said, and then I throw them away. It would be a waste, man. And I was like, pretty insulted. I don't want to give you any gifts anymore Because it sounds like you would just throw them immediately
I don't
in the
want to
garbage.
give you any gifts anymore. What I'm saying is, if you sent me the fancy shit, right, I would be like, oh, this is so great. I'll put this limoncello over here. I don't know what you do with limoncello. And then it would sit there for months. And then it would I would move it to another place and then move it somewhere else. And as time goes by, I would eventually throw it away. So I said, please don't send me things that,
Well, first of all, what you do with the limoncello is it is a key part of any good citrus orchestra. It's very important for that.
You're going to keep hitting that same dad joke? You're just
over and over. Wow. All day long. It's interesting. This was something I was going to bring up, but it kind of naturally came up with the comments. I was thinking, well, I could buy you a thing of limoncello, and you texted back, no, I don't care. I just forget about it and throw it out months later.
Right.
You live with somebody else who might appreciate some good cocktails and might appreciate a fancy liquor. And in fact, that person says, maybe we can make the cocktails together, Pete.
Don't
That'd be a nice couple activity, right?
Don't
Pete?
get me in trouble here. You don't know what it's like, okay? This is of no concern to you.
Well, anyway, thank you, Brett, for designing the Pete Palmer. I hope everybody is enjoying a refreshing Pete Palmer, or if you're having a good hummus Collins out there, whatever you're drinking.
Hey, whatever you're into, put some booze into it,
All right, as mentioned, we have a couple of great guests for you on the show, but I want to bring in the first one here. He is the creator of a new Kickstarter project called Man-Child that is running right now. His name is Nandor Fox Shaffer. Nandor, welcome to the show. Hello.
Hey guys. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited.
No problem. Right. I really like the framing of your comic corner there with the shield right over your head. That's really good. I just have a blank wall going on.
Yeah. I actually I started a YouTube channel this year, and I was doing all these streams and going on all these shows last year for my other book, and I knew for my new one that I wanted to just have a better setup and share with everyone what I love behind me, and so they kind of get a sense of my personality or what I like to read, or my interests and stuff. But I moved these shelves and did all this work in my office here the beginning of January, February, and got it all going. So I'm pretty happy with it. There were some happy accidents, and the shield was one of them. I was like, that'd be a really cool centerpiece. So I decided to go with that.
Well, it works. It's really working for you. Let's talk about Man-Child a little bit, because this is an interesting project. It's live, as we mentioned, on Kickstarter right now. You still got 21 days to go if anybody wants to pledge it at the end of this. But the big thing is it's inspired and dedicated to the life of comics legend Stan Lee, is what it says here right at the top. I mean, it's kind of obvious why people are inspired by Stan Lee, but why in particular were you inspired by Stan Lee?
Totally. So this story is really fresh in my mind. I mean, I've been working on it for a year or two, but I got the idea for it after Stan Lee passed. And after he passed, I was really devastated, and a world without Stan Lee seemed like a lesser world. And I wanted to give back, and I wanted to do something that paid homage to him or tribute. And I wanted to rediscover his life and his history and the history of Marvel Comics. And so I did a lot of research. I read 3-4 biographies about his life and about the history of Marvel Comics, and I went back to the Silver Age and the Marvel Age of Comics and started rereading the classics that he and Kirby and Ditko did, and I just found a new love for him and for what he was able to do. And the more I researched him and the more I looked at his life and his insecurities as a creator, and at a time when comics were definitely not respected, and we still have some work there today, but can you imagine, in the 60s and doing comics, writing comics, and not seen as a real creator or a real writer that's actually making literature or great art. And so that really inspired what this story became, and it started with that, and then it just blossomed into something more.
Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe part of the idea is that you've got superheroics, you got regular comic book stuff going on there, but you've also at the same time got some real world stuff as well. So how do you balance that
Yeah.
mix? How do you bring it together?
Yeah, it's honestly one of the great mysteries of this story is how the real world and this Silver Age inspired world connect, and that's something that the reader is going to have to figure out as they go through this limited series here. And uh, you follow the captivating Monarch Crier as he battles Professor Pilgrim, and the Monarch Crier is this hero of New York City, and Professor Pilgrim is a super tech genius who has his own island in the North Pacific. And you watch their adventures and see how they battle each other, and you get, and that portion of the story is all written in a style like you were reading a 60s or 70s comic. So it has the feel and the look and the tone and the excitement and all the exclamation marks that you could, possibly want out of a Silver Age book. And then you go into the modern day setting, and you're going to be reading these two stories simultaneously. So when you get to the modern day setting, you're going to be reading, and then you're going to flip the page, and you're going to be in the modern day. And then you're going to be reading that story, and you're going to flip the page, and you'll be in the Silver Age. And the modern age story follows Rufus Boston, who is this super ultra comic book nerd who loves comics. He goes to the comic book store every week. He hangs out with his friends. They're going to the new blockbuster summer movie, and it's looking at the trajectory and the history of the medium and how far we've come and how much things have changed over the years and how much the medium has grown and become more respected and better as the years have gone on. So you're getting this push and pull and this back and forth, and seeing fantasy being bridged with reality, and the dream being bridged with the dreamer. So it's really embracing what the medium has done for people, and then going back to how that all started with Stan Lee and with the way heroes were kind of reconstructed and how they've evolved and grown over the years.
Well, to that point, Pete and I were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but there's been a reevaluation of certain parts of Stan Lee's legacy over the
Yeah.
past couple of years. Is that anything that impacted the project, or at least the way you tackled it, or did you feel like that didn't enter the equation?
No, it actually does. There's actually a conversation in the very first issue where Rufus, the main character in the modern day storyline, there. So in this world, in his world, there is a their version of Stanley, like this comic creator who had passed away, and him and his friends are talking about him. And there's this one guy that comes in the conversation, and he is one of those guys that would say, Stanley was just a thief, or this character is just a thief, and he actually didn't create those characters. And so you're actually getting that back and forth, and you're seeing both of those perspectives being told through character. So I really wanted to look at it in a very honest and sincere way with Stanley's life, and I didn't want to be biased. But after all the research I did and looking at it as objectively as possible with the information I was given, I tried to be really honest with it, but at the same time, give it enough back and forth to where it's up to the reader to come to their own conclusion, and up to these characters to come up with their own conclusion of who this creator was.
So, Pete?
I was just going to say, I really, the Kickstarter page and like video, we've seen a ton of them. I really appreciate all the time that you took to kind of explain like where the idea came from and what's going on. A lot of times when you see a Kickstarter, it's like, hey, there's some fighting sometimes. Please give me money. And you're like, all right, But it's great to
I'd
kind
give
of
that money. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I mean, we both would definitely. But I just think it's great the depth that you go into. It really kind of like opens up to let us see you a little bit in the kind of in how it was made, which I appreciate.
Thank you.
We have a question over here on YouTube. This is from Ramsey Hassan. Says, I wonder if Kirby or Ditko are in this comic. Is that anything you address, particularly because there's questions about who is the main creator, who is the co-creator on these sort of things?
I will say I don't necessarily show them, but we talk about them, and we have characters that use like pseudonyms for those names just to avoid any legalities or whatever. But you'll be reading these conversations, and you'll know who the characters are talking about.
Got it. All right, that seems fair. That seems good. You're a little vague there, but I appreciate it. This is a mini series. You're launching the first issue on Kickstarter. Is the plan to have it ongoing from there? Or are you going to launch each issue individually on the Kickstarter, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, I'm planning on launching each issue individually on Kickstarter. I do want to take the first issue, possibly 2 different indie publishers if they like it, if they want to pick it up, if they want to talk about it more or something. I always really love sharing my work with, anyone I can. And I've been really my whole idea for what I want to do is, have enough books under my belt to bring to editors and to bring to other people and show them my work and what I've done and what I've created. But I'm actually writing the final issue of Manchild right now, so
cool.
I've invested so much time, and I've been working on the series for a while. So if there is anyone that's going, oh man, like, is this actually going anywhere? Because sometimes you'll see those Kickstarters where it's like, oh, it's the first issue, but like, has the writer creator actually thought about where they're going to take the story? And I'm writing the final issue right now, so issues 2, 3, 4, and 5 are completely done and ready to go. And it's been something that this has been the most excited thing that I've written that I'm excited to talk about and promote. So and I can tell just from the amount of writing that I've been doing over the years just how much better everything has gotten and how much better of a writer that I've become. So it's this series really means a lot to me. I really got to explore and rediscover my childhood and superheroes and looking at the medium itself, and it's been a rejuvenation in a lot of ways.
Awesome.
Well, that's awesome.
Nandor, congrats on the book. Good luck with the Kickstarter. You're about to get that vaunted comic book club bump that comes every single time. But appreciate it. Good luck, and we'll have to have you back on if and when the second issue comes out. So talk soon.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, thank you guys so much.
All right, have a good night, Nandor. All right, once again, that is Nandor Fox Shaffer. The book is called Manchild, and it is on Kickstarter for the next 21 days or so. If you're listening to this later, it's less than that, but you still have plenty of time. Let's bring our second guest here into the stream. He is one of the hosts of the ComicPop podcast and show, Sal Crevelli. Welcome back, Sal.
Welcome back.
Good to see you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks so much for having me back on the show.
Oh my gosh. I mentioned this when we were doing a quick tech check. I'm embarrassed about our camera quality. Your camera quality is much better.
I was myself, which is why I got a new one. This is very much like a new camera. It's a whole new setup, so don't be
looking good, Sal. Looking good.
Thank you very much. And so are the both of you. I think it's just great to
this
see
old
you
thing.
again.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about this. This is very inside baseball, but we haven't talked to you since years at this point, but we had you last live on stage.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a lot of live on stage lately, Sal. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but what is managing through the pandemic and managing the ComicPop channel been like for you?
I hesitate to say that it's been great because it sounds like ghoulish, but it was pretty great. Like, we did very well. Like,
all right.
People were trapped indoors, and you
developed the Moderna vaccine, right? So that's been
that was
like
me,
great. So it's been very
I'm a billionaire,
profitable.
which is why I have the new camera set up.
Oh, okay, that's
obviously
explains the new camera.
That's right. But genuinely, we found, because I had already made the decision to do this full time, I was already inside and I was already making these shows, and we'd already kind of been making live shows, so I just kind of just kept doing it and just kept being consistently available, and people came and they were happy, to talk about anything else, as was I. And so we were able to make it work, and we saw a little bit of a bump as a result of people kind of being trapped indoors and not having much else to do, especially given even like our audience who reads comics couldn't read them because they weren't available. Like, they weren't distributing them, they weren't making them. So it was just kind of like, well, what the hell are we going to talk about? And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what we're going to talk about. Comics that came out 25 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I was re-uploading some of our old episodes about a month ago because we switched servers. Again, this is very inside baseball, but this is relevant to what you were saying, because I was looking back through the episode descriptions for the beginning of the pandemic where we were doing the same thing. We were like, there's no comics. We're going to talk about trades that came out a while ago. And you can see just things getting steadily more and more insane and crazy as you go through time through the episode descriptions. But we're through that. At least we have new comics coming out all the time, even though the distribution has changed. How, if all, has that affected your show based on the fact that now comics are coming out all the time?
Right. I've always cherry-picked my books. I know there are a lot of comic review shows, one of them being our show Off the Rack, where we talk about the newest books that came out, but we don't talk about every book. We just talk about the ones we read or the ones that we kind of want to talk about. And so cherry picking them has always been a thing for me. And so I've never really deviated from that system. So as a result, it's just we've had a wider pool, but we still kind of limit it to the same 10 or 15 number. It's just sometimes those books will shift. Like, I wasn't really reading Daredevil until Zdarsky took over. And then it's like, oh, well, Daredevil's on my pull list now. We're talking about that and other things. Actually, I owe you guys a debt of gratitude, because my wife had been telling me how awesome Daniel Warren Johnson was forever. And I was like, right on. Like, it's one of those indie books that she likes so much, because she's like she's big into the indie scene and the Vertigo scene and stuff like that. And I'm more of a Spider-Man, Batman nerd. And she was always like, man, this Danny Warren Johnson guy. And Pete was always talking about Murder Falcon.
That's right.
And you dropped it on the show that I was on, where I was on stage, and he's just like, Murder Falcon. And I'm like, is this like a meme? Like, is he just saying two words that don't work together? And then I picked up Wonder Woman Dead Earth. Oh my God. And it opened up my world. And
welcome to the world.
Exactly. And dude just kills it. But that kind of came about during, like, my respect for and awareness of D-dubs was as a result of the pandemic, but also because of your endorsement. I was like, oh, this is the guy they were talking about, that Murder Falcon.
That Murder Falcon guy.
I mean, Pete is basically like a Pokemon, except instead of saying his own name, he just says Murder Falcon over and over again. That's true. But wait, have you gone back and read that then? I assume you've read Beta Ray Bill. Did you read Murder Falcon as well?
I did not. I read the first couple of issues of Murder Falcon. I'm like, all right. Like, I see, because he loves wrestling, and he's all
you
like,
had Pete, and then you lost him.
I'm sorry. Well, I can't love everything. But
there's a lot of twists and turns coming in that Murder Falcon book if you just roll with it.
I will
roll with you're like, oh, okay, I got to understand what's happening, but like,
listen, he's earned any benefit of the doubt. As have you guys. So I'm happy to take your endorsement, and I'll listen to it, because I'm more into, I don't know, his other stuff. Like, I love he sent me a like the mini graphic, like the little thing he did of Luke. Like, he did like a Star Wars book. And that I'm like, oh, do a Star Wars book, do an Alien book. But instead, at least we got Beta Ray Bill.
Yeah, amazing.
So dope.
Just the relationship with the ship and everything.
I know.
It was just
so sad. I was like, oh God, when Scuttlebutt became a sentient, Metropolis meets heavy metal, sexy lady, I was like, is Beta Ray Bill going to bang his ship? Are we going to see that in this book?
I was honestly disappointed that we didn't. Like, I thought that's where everything was heading.
Right?
I was a little bummed out.
Or maybe Scourge and Scuttlebutt get together, but like neither. Instead, she's just a shoulder to cry on. Which, like, no complaints. You get an epic Surtur fight. You got some Hook references. I'm selling Beta Ray Bill like I have stock.
Listen, maybe I'm in the minority here, but I thought the ship was sexy before it was a lady,
right.
honestly,
that may be a more of a niche, you know.
maybe a little
but she's a gateway now for everybody. Like now it's like, oh, now you can appreciate how sexy Scuttlebutt has always been.
Yeah. We have a question here on YouTube. I believe this is for you, Sal. I would love to hear you guys talk about, this is for both of us. I would love to hear you guys talk about how both CBC and Sal with Benny have moved into movie TV, and is it superseding comics in relevance?
I mean, what do you guys think? I'm interested to hear your opinion.
I really think you got to kind of bow down to the comics. I mean, this is where everything is sprouting from. So, don't kind of put the horse or the cart in front of the horse there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Pete's going to yell at me for this. I think the thing is, for our show and for our lives and for my life, I'll always come back to comic books. That's the original thing, like Pete says, I fell in love with. But yes, of course, TV and movies have superseded in terms of pop culture. We've been doing a spin-off podcast, a Marvel podcast called Marvel Vision, and something that we argue about all the time. Pete and I are very much on the opposite end of the spectrum about this, but I believe very strongly that there are people who are MCU fans. Period. Yeah. And that's it.
They do not want to read comics. They're just I love these characters, and that's that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was a very weird adjustment for me to make when these movies started to come out, that people are like, oh my God, I love Iron Man. Iron Man's so cool. Iron Man's the best character. And it took me a while, honestly, watching these movies to come around to that, because I liked Robert Downey Jr., but I was sort of stuck in, no, Iron Man's like a C-list character. What are you talking about? Yeah. This is not anything anybody actually cares about. And of course they do. And they care about Iron Man more than a lot of the other characters. So you have to recognize that as well. And also, just based on the MCU alone, that's been over a decade now. So that has its own history behind it.
Absolutely. I mean, just generally speaking, I feel like, to answer that question, movies have always been bigger than comic books. I love comic books. They're my first love. And I also love movies, and I love the cinema and film itself. But like, it's apples and oranges. Cinema has always had a bigger yoke around the neck of society and culture, and comics are just like, we're just happy to tag along. And I hate that, and I don't believe in it. Like, here's a name I'm going to drop. I was talking to Tom King the other day, and but we were talking.
How's it feel, Zalps? How's it feel when someone does it to you?
Right,
totally
exactly.
Fine.
Great.
I'm very happy for you.
But he was like, I would love to have an Academy Award. And I was like, I would rather have an Eisner. And he's like, you are lying. And I'm like, you have at least one. Like, come on, man. And he's like, yeah, I mean, but like, but the Academy
I agree
Award,
with you, though. I'd rather have an Eisner.
right? Because like the Academy Award, like, I mean, it's funny. I thought that, and then I went to that museum in Queens, in Astoria, where they have the Muppets and stuff.
Yeah, the television museum. Yeah.
Yes, which, by the way, dope. Been there twice.
It's awesome.
You should go.
Yeah.
But they have a Kubrick exhibit, and his Oscar is there. And I've never been that close to an Academy Award before, and I legitimately had, like, not like a panic attack, but I like had emotion around it. I'm like, it's just a stupid statue. Like, lives have been ruined over this dumbass. And I'm like, but I'm like, oh my God, I've never been this close to an Academy Award. So I guess I get what he's talking about. But that's the power of cinema and how much bigger it is, But like,
well, and here's the other, I think, sad truth about that in particular, about Eisner versus Academy Award, is they both recognize achievement, and that's great. And this is not the be all end all, but an Eisner is not necessarily going to lead to more jobs and opportunities. An Academy Award almost absolutely will.
Yeah, unless it's Crash, it's a guarantee.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be exceptions even with an Academy Award, but at the same time, particularly like, let's say you're a small-time filmmaker who got their first break, you get an Academy Award, you're going to get a lot more meetings, and then it's up to you to screw it up.
Exactly.
With an Eisner, it's going to go, like, that is more the exception than the rule. I think you got to be like somebody that nobody knows, you get an Eisner, and suddenly you get a meeting where you're able to do something that's going to bring you a little bit more money, but mostly it's, yes, we already know you. Congratulations, you're getting this award. You did a really good job this year.
We saw you at the dinner.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just so much more insular and small. So, it's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. But
we got another question over here. This is from Scott Carpenter. It says, since both Comic Book Club and ComicPop have Patreons, thoughts on Substack, pros and cons?
I thought about asking you guys about this because I've been yelling about it for 2 full days. So
Wow.
Well, let's give a little bit of background because I think everybody is a little confused about what's going on with Substack, and feel free to chime in on anything that I miss. But Substack essentially is a blogging platform that is hoping to become something more. To me, it strikes me a lot like Medium was a couple of years ago, the same sort of thing. But they've made a lot of push initially with journalists and other experts to bring them on, to have them make newsletters and things like that. And now the next thing that they're moving into is comic books. And the person leading that charge is Nick Spencer, who has brought on board a lot of different comic book creators, writers, and artists to try to create their own newsletters, their own verticals, their own blogs, their own whatever have you. And he has gotten some really good name creators to do it. Scott Snyder is doing classes through his Substack. Jonathan Hickman is working with a bunch of artists and creators to... It's unclear because it's Hickman, but it's essentially creating this massive multi-tier world that they're going to jam on and open up the process so people will see it is. And the biggest one, though, or at least the biggest one in terms of moves, is James Tynion IV, who said in a article in the New York Times that he had 2 contracts in front of him, re-upping with DC or going to Substack. He could not do both because of time. He decided to go to Substack, and the reason is if he goes to Substack, he completely owns all his work. The first year, they take most of the money from subscriptions. After that, I believe they take 10%, and that's the deal. So I believe his hope there, and a lot of the creators' hopes, is they're doing 100% creator-owned things that then they potentially can sell to other mediums. So that's the backstory there. Sal, if you've been yelling about this for 2 days, what's your take?
I mean, on one hand, I think that it's... Okay, so this is a long way to say this, but, like, it seems that there is like a system to making extra money, because you don't get into the comic book industry to make money, but you still need to get paid and have health insurance. So how do you do that? And you come up with different creative ways of doing that. For James Tynion IV, it is creating 1,000 new Batman characters so that one of them will end up in Gotham or some other TV show. It's the nature of the beast. Bendis is a pioneer at it, so I get it. Like, I get the idea of, like, that's what I do. I create new characters. Those characters show up in shows. I get residuals, and I get residuals forever. End of story. I get better pay through TV than I do in movies. Plus, I can then maybe get a foot in the door in the TV and movie industry. Because Substack, I don't think, is going to succeed, because I think it's new. I think it got a lot of seed money. I think that anytime anybody tries to profit off of the comic book industry, I feel like they are asking for a hard time, especially off the back of it. And this is one of those things where they were like, well, we want to get into this. Like, we're a newsletter distribution system. We're Patreon, but for bloggers, like you said. And it's like, that's not sustainable. And they gotta I think it was $65 million seed money from like some investment group. And I feel like the only way that you can get James Tynion IV to stop writing Batman after a juicy 3-year contract is if you're offering an obscene amount of money. And it's the same with Hickman. It's the same with Scotty Young. And I'm sure more creators will follow. And I feel like on one hand, good for them, because, like, get that cheddar, right? Pay yourself. And if it keeps you from from bloating universes with characters that don't matter, then even better. But, like, that contract will never come again. Like, that opportunity to get, like, this huge cash advance and the opportunity to circumvent the usual route of making TV shows by, like, parlaying your comic book superhero career into an independent career, and then taking that independent work and then having it adapted into TV and movies and hopefully get your foot in the door that way. If instead you can just be paid to make the indie book without having to make any deals with any independent publishers, and then get the eyeballs on it plus the money on it, and then still end up doing that anyway, but you don't have to do anything besides just purely create, and you own it all. I mean, why wouldn't you do that?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also unsustainable. I just don't think it's like, I think we're going to be talking about this in 6 months, being like, man, 6 people got a lot of money to not have to to not have to write Batman for 6 months. Like, that's how I feel about it.
Well, I'll tell you what, we were going to wait until we were done chatting with you, Sal, to bring him in. But our other guest, Kyle Higgins, is here, and he was chatting about it a little bit in the comments. So I'm going to bring him here into the stream. Hopefully that'll work okay, because I'm sure he has some expert input on this sort of thing. That said, while you're chatting, I agree with you. I think I'm all for creativity. I think the more places people can put their creativity, the better. You know, fingers crossed Substack succeeds the same way that people are like, Twitter was bad back in the day. Maybe it'll turn out to be good, but we'll see what happens. Kyle, welcome. Hello. How are you? Sorry we confused you with what's
no
going
worries. My apologies. I got the link from Kat, and then I've just been here. So I guess it logged me in, but it didn't log me in. I'm not really sure.
It's all good. Yes, but, welcome. So just to give everybody a background, Kyle Higgins, amazing writer, working on Ordinary Gods over at Image Comics, as well as Radiant Black, which is awesome and we love on the show.
Thank you.
But I figured normally we would have waited until Sal was off and then we bring you in chat, but we're talking about the Substack thing anyway, and I'm sure you have some input on it. So what's your take?
Well, no, Sal's on point for a lot of it. From a creator's perspective, well, a few things. The one point I would push back on is James's intention behind creating original characters. The reality of that situation is that we don't make money on those characters. We just don't. Under Paul Levitz, there used to be thank you checks that went out. DC still does do thank yous, basically, when you bring to them, like, to their attention, like, hey, I have a character, like, actually they're still cool about it, not to the extent Paul was, but they're still cool about it in that, like, I found out that some of my stuff influenced some episodes of Gotham 5 years after it aired, and I reached out to DC and they were like, oh yeah, send us the stuff. I did, and they paid me a little bit of money as a thank you. Okay. The reality is those checks are not paying your rent.
No, that's right.
So creating new characters, in a lot of ways, just like to get on a soapbox for half a second, James is doing something fantastic for Batman fans and Batman readers, because James has no incentive to create new characters. Creating new characters that he doesn't own. I'm sitting here next to a helmet for Lord Draken and action figures for Lord Draken and Ranger Slayer. I get that much money for them. Mm-hmm. There's no incentive to create new characters for existing IP other than because it's the right thing to do for the story. So that's the one point I would push back on. Beyond that, though, as far as what Substack is offering, and I don't have a deal or relationship with them at this point or anything, but from something you mentioned as far as like profiting on the back of comics, it's interesting because I know where you're coming from with that. I think it's actually a little bit different, though. They're trying to grow their audience, and the fact is they are not interested in owning any portion of the intellectual property. If they were looking to profit off comics, they would be positioning themselves as at least co-owners of the IP with business control, so that they could turn around and try to go sell a show or a streaming show or a movie.
Right.
And the number of creators, the number of friends that I have who have books at publishers with deals that aren't great is significant. Right. And that's the thing. Outside of Image, there really is no other truly creator-owned environment.
I agree with you there. But I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. If you
No, go for it. Yeah.
But in that respect, my point is not necessarily that Substack's trying to break into the comic book industry. It's more that Substack is looking for the audiences that James and Jonathan are bringing in, and the idea is that they're able to give these kind of sweetheart deals. And I'm only assuming because I don't have the details of these contracts, but the fact is we've seen that they don't own, like you said, they don't own the property, they don't own the IP. Whereas we don't know 6 months to a year down the line if they will change that contract. But just looking at it from the perspective of now, if you say we're bringing you in, you get to keep everything, you make whatever you want. We just want to see the pure exploration of creation, and it's like, yeah, that's true. But really, what you're trying to do is you want to get these people who follow you. It's just like when you go from a a large character at a big 2 company and then go to the independent like market, you're bringing that audience with you, and you're trying to.
Well, you hope to.
Well, that's the thing. Is you hope to. Instead, Substack is paying, I think, to buy access to that audience, and that's what I mean when I'm saying like profiting off the backs of the comic book industry. It's more just like, well, that's an industry that I'm trying to get bodies from, so that we can inflate our numbers here at Substack.
Sal, not to interrupt you, but I think more than anything, what I get from it, from an audience perspective is, and I think I'm agreeing with you here, is what they're doing is they're doing advertising for Substack, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is they have a very fractured platform right now that's based on these individual personalities.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily, as far as I can tell, building it out as like substack.com/comics, like creating a comics hub, but they're essentially implying like, if you want really creative comics, if you're interested in comics content, come here. But to the point you're making, the thing that I worry about is I don't think it's a negative for people like James who get to create these things, have these IP that they're creating, talking about it in a very callous business way, that they own, that they could spin out into other things, that they could bring to another place eventually. But I don't know necessarily if it's the sort of thing where like you're going to get James's audience, maybe you'll get some of Scott Snyder's audience over there, but you're not necessarily building a new comics audience that's going to bring in there. It's a smaller comics audience than you already have. At least that's my concern.
Yeah. I would counter argue that. And the counter argument is that the reach that you get in digital compared to the direct market is far harder to quantify. Comixology, for example, is, the digital side of a creator-owned book is a drop in the bucket compared to the direct market and brick and mortar. And the brick and mortar are the lifeblood of our industry in the traditional sense. What you see with things like Webtoon, I think actually probably demonstrate how far-reaching a designed to be digital presence can be, and how far-reaching that audience can go beyond what you would traditionally expect as far as what the comic book audience is. And the other thing too is like, I think what you're talking about a little bit there, as far as like a smaller and smaller audience, like Twitter, for example, is not a good representation of anything in the world, but it's also not a good representation of the comics buying community. I mean, it's a microcosm in some ways, but in other ways it's not. And there's a lot of discourse that happens there within the comic book industry. And a whole lot of creators, myself included, have actively been looking for ways to take the discourse away from Twitter. Yeah. Because it's not a place that I want to be personally. And it's not in the traditional way that you sell books. It's not really that effective. A lot of creators think that marketing is noise on social media, and it's not. It's just that, it's noise. Marketing in the real sense is marketing to retailers. It's marketing to specifically to buyers. And in the traditional model, it's very hard to do that across social media, because with the exception of like something we're doing on Radiant Black and Ordinary Gods, in that we're building a site with a dedicated URL that you can find the book through not only your local shop, but here's a direct purchase option through my hometown store, Golden Apple, that's supported me my whole career, and they will ship it to your door. Here's one link that you can go to buy our book.
That's awesome.
That's hard. Great. Thanks. That's hard to do within the traditional direct market model. So in some ways, there are limitations there as far as like how big an audience in the direct market can actually grow. I do think there is very much a ceiling on that in some ways, but I don't know. Like from a Substack model, like I don't know what the money is, but it is absolutely paying to play as far as trying to give a platform to a side of an industry anyway that was looking for a new platform, and they were just looking for a reason to move. Right. So
well, let me ask you a question, and this isn't entirely fair because, as you mentioned, you don't have a Substack deal or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But what potentially is the difference creatively for the creator between, say, moving something and doing your own projects in Substack versus what you're doing, which is on Image Comics?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a couple things. Image is a situation where it's an advance. So if you negotiate an advance for your book, it is that. It is paid when you finish an issue, but it is counted against your royalties because it's truly creator owned. So the cat and mouse game is, even if you could get a big enough advance. Sorry, let me rewind a second. The real thing, what it comes down to at the end of the day, more than anything else, and I guarantee you, I would stake my career on it, that if you asked 10 comic book writers doing deals at Substack what the number one thing they were most excited about is, and this is me having not talked to anybody, I guarantee you that if not the first, then the second thing they would say is being able to pay an artist.
Yeah.
Wow.
Doing a creator-owned book with talented artists, talented collaborators, talented co-creators, it's very hard. Because when you think about it, like, gun to my head, I could write a script in 2 to 3 days, okay? It's not fun. It's not going to be my best work. I can do it, okay? Or
Also,
at least
you have a
plot
gun to
in
your
a day
head,
or
which
two.
is
Well, yeah,
bad.
there is that.
Really stressful.
But an artist is going to take 5 weeks to draw a book.
Right.
If they race, they could do it in 3. It's not going to be pretty. But that is still a significant amount of time, and that's 12 to 14 hours at a board minimum, right? So what Marvel and DC pay as far as page rates is incredibly small in the grand scheme of the entertainment industry, but it's incredibly high in the comic book industry. So when you position yourself to go do a creator-owned book and you want to work, say you have an artist that you did do a bunch of work with at DC, whose stuff is amazing, who you love working with, and then you move over and try to go do a creator-owned book, well, that artist still they need to eat. They need to pay their mortgage, and the hours behind the board are not going to get shorter just because you own the property.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, if you're negotiating an advance, the advance might be significantly higher than the book can probably afford, because if it's not starring Batman, it's probably going to sell less than Batman.
Yeah.
So then you get into this situation of, like, who's taking a haircut? How much are you going into debt to build out this book? How much as a writer are you financing, if you're financing at all yourself? So the idea that, like, hey, you can make a competitive page rate, not kill yourself, own the IP, and we can start right now. Like, I mean, artists, if the deal's fair and literally what I just said, those three things, then it's like you're gonna have anyone doing a book like that is gonna have their pick.
Oh yeah, and that's not to necessarily crap on the idea of the Substack. It's more that I don't blame any creator for taking the Substack deal, because number one, they get to make whatever they want in a vacuum for whatever they want. Scott talks about it when he talks about working on those, like, 9 books that he's pushing through Best Jacket, where he's like, we get to work with Greg Capullo again. And it's like, a layman might assume that, like, well, why don't you work with him all the time? And it's like, because Greg Capullo has a page rate that is competitively on the topper echelon, and the idea is if you give him that job, he has to take away a job, and that job is going to pay Greg Capullo rate, so you gotta match that rate. So I don't blame any creator for going to Substack, but I'm also not going to pretend that Substack is the wave of the future or that it's going to last a long time. I think that this is a great opportunity for a handful of very large name creators to get their check, which is good for them, but also, like, let's not pretend that it's something new or that we've never seen this before.
But where is that money going?
It's going into the project that they're creating for their audience, which
Okay,
admittedly is great.
Then,
good for them.
Then maybe it's not out there yet. So maybe it's not my place to speak on this. But do not be surprised if you start seeing books and projects that are curated and financed as part of these deals.
Right.
And because I know Scott and James really, really well.
Yeah.
That's really important to them.
Right.
Yeah.
So
they've talked on, I mean, it makes sense to me, like, that they would want to make a project
No. It's not making a project. What I'm saying is, as a part of their Substack deal, I would not be surprised if part of that also includes, like, if James turns around and says, I really like this writer. I really like this idea. They're brand new. They've never done something before.
I see. Okay.
Let's do this through my Substack deal. I mean, it's what I'm doing as an editor on things like Inferno Girl Red and Self-Made, and there are some other things that aren't announced yet. But essentially what I've done over the years is I've started going out. Last Flight Out, the new Dark Horse book. That's a book that I put together. And I put the art team together and I edited the book for Mark. And then we walked it to Dark Horse. So that facilitating of not only existing creators, in the case of this one with Mark, but new creators. I have 5 books right now with brand new creators that I'm serving as the editor on that I put together.
Okay.
You know, it'd be great. If someone was paying me as a part of an overall deal, so I could actually pay for those myself so that they can be made, and that these creators suddenly have a larger platform to tell their stories on.
Yeah.
I think, just to jump off of what Sal was saying a little bit, I think the trepidation from comic book fans that we're talking around here is, what does this mean long term? What does this mean 2 or 3, 5 years down the road?
Yeah.
But based on what we are talking about, and specifically what you're talking about, Kyle, it strikes me that this is a little bit more part of what has been going on in the comics ecosystem anyway, going all the way back to when Kickstarter first launched and creators suddenly realized, oh, wait, I could do this myself, and then maybe later on bring it to a Dark Horse, bring it to an Image Comic Books, have somebody do the print version, but I can have control of it initially. So maybe what people need to stop worrying about is, oh no, James Tynion is leaving Batman, which... fine. That's totally. No, that's not the concern, doing a great job, but it's okay. But this is a step. This is another thing that is happening in addition to everything else. It's not taking away from anything, potentially.
I think it'll be. I was just going to say. I think it'll be interesting to see where print editions of these books land, if anywhere. You know, and some creators, it's going to be a priority for them to make sure that these exist in print, in a print version for the direct market. Sure. Other creators may not be as important to them. Right. But the good news is that when creators own what they create, at the end of the day, you're probably going to get cooler stuff as a result of it. And it's probably not going to disappear or ever go out of print. Like, that's something that we as creators are like pretty obsessed, you know, like we very much, it kills us when our stuff is hard to find. Yeah. You know, we're way too insecure / narcissistic to
find your work on the shelf.
To just be okay with, like, well, I guess it's just never gonna be out there again. Right. You know, like, so even if 2 to 3 years, even if 6 months from now, for example, the money isn't there anymore, and like you say, like, who the hell knows? Like, even if that's the case, like, if we get some cool stuff out of it, like,
no harm, no foul.
Yeah, in my opinion, anyway. Yeah,
that's a fascinating point. I don't mean to. I'm sorry. We kind of. I was like, that's kind of became an old thing, but I love that. I love that idea of it kind of dovetailing into like a studio kind of situation where it's like, it's not going to be. Theoretically speaking, it could be. It's not that you're paying $7 a month to get the new James Tynion book. It's more you're paying $7 a month to fund James Tynion Studios, and they produce a number of works underneath it.
Well, and this started off with a question about how is it like Patreon or not. And
right.
So there you go. We came around to the thing that we started half an hour ago.
Indeed.
I did. Kyle, this is a question for you from YouTube. This is from How Long Can You Make a Name? Kyle, does the fact that artists can sell their original art make up for less upfront pay?
No. And if you ever try to make that argument, like, to an artist, like, that's not solid ground to try to stand on, much less build a foundation on. No, the thing is, this is an industry, like, not to sound cynical, but, like, this is an industry that is, like, very exploitative. Like, yeah. So artists being able to sell original art, like, that's like the least that should be happening. The fact that, you know, I mean, just look into your previous guest who was talking about Jack Kirby. Like, I bet he would have a lot that he could weigh in on here as far as the fight to get original art back to artists in the first place, which went on for way too long.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, here's the bigger reality. The original art market is booming, and the number of artists who are drawing traditionally is not going up.
Yeah.
There are a lot of artists that draw digitally these days because the deadlines are brutal. Some artists find they have more control and they prefer, there are things they can't do traditionally that they're able to do digitally. Other artists do it for speed or convenience. But what that means is that there's no original to sell, and selling an AP, an artist proof or an artist print, it's just not the same. It's not the same at all.
Here's one other one for you. This is from Scott Carpenter. Wondering if the Kickstarter module might be best. Did Kyle get a fair share of Power Rangers on Kickstarter because those collections got a ton of money?
No. You know what? I didn't know they were doing a Kickstarter. And on top of that, I expect I won't see $1 from that.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry.
I did see that there was, when it first launched, I checked it out because there was a paragraph in there that said, don't worry, the creators have all been paid. You know, they were paid for their work, and they'll get industry standard royalties on these. And, you know, I had my lawyer reach out and say, so what exactly does that mean? Because we don't know. And, you know, I've never actually been paid royalties on the hardcovers. I've been paid 2 discretionary bonuses at one point, or 2 different times, but
sure,
very, very small amount of money. So as far as I'm concerned, I won't be seeing a dime on those hardcovers. But, you know, at the end of the day, I signed the contract I signed, and I knew it. It was a work for hire deal. It's comics. And the thing about the Power Rangers stuff that people may not realize is that as a licensed comic, not only is Boom, well, I don't know what Boom's deal is, so I shouldn't say that. But what I do know is that everything that is created in those comics is owned by, well, now Hasbro. So it's not only work for hire for the publisher. What the publisher is doing is kind of like, it's licensing. So it's a licensing deal. So it's technically all owned then by the licensor.
Man, that's wild. I'm sorry to hear that. This is from Breakfast of Champions. Says, let's get some hype going for an Infernal Girl Red versus Radiant Black crossover. We're going to see that.
Sorry, what was it? I saw. I was distracted by a comment in the someone in the comments said unionized. There's a writers union in Hollywood. That's work for hire. Yes, I am well aware. I not only live in West Hollywood, and I'm a screenwriter as well. There have been many attempts over the years to unionize in the comics industry, and it has not happened for a variety of reasons.
The slightly lighter question that was here, or slightly lighter statement, was, let's get some hype going for an Inferno Girl Red versus Radiant Black crossover.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool?
Oh, I like that. ...
Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be cool. Well, listen, Kyle, I want to keep you hanging on here because I do want to talk about your image books. The reason we brought you on in the first place. Sal, it was so good
I'm
to see
so
you.
sorry. I feel like I jumped on your spot.
No, I'm glad you did. It was a great
opportunity.
opportunity for us to chat. I don't think we've ever met, so it's nice to meet you, man. But,
no, it's nice to meet you too. Can Sal stay? Can we all just
Yeah, sure.
chat?
Sal, you want to hang out?
if you guys don't mind, I don't mind,
totally
I'll
fine
take,
with
I'll
me.
take Justin's spot.
Sal hates indie books is the only problem.
No, I do not hate indie books.
I said it earlier.
Yeah, he did say that.
My wife
earlier.
reads more of them than I do.
All right.
So
Well,
It's okay. Your wife's better than you are. It's
it's fine. It's not
I'm happy
a big
to
deal.
admit that.
Let's talk about Ordinary Gods, which just launched. The second issue is, I believe, coming out tomorrow from Image Comics, and this is such a super cool mashup of so many ideas. I hesitate to even describe what the concept is because that's kind of a part of the twist, the big twist of the first issue. But how do you pitch this? What's the pitch line for this book?
Well, it's I got to start with the generic comp, right? It's this meets this. It's this by way of this. It's this through the lens of that. But this is very much in the wheelhouse of like it's like a kind of a cross between the Matrix and Highlander. And so it is this it is this sci-fi fantasy series, but it's really this look at these 5 immortals that are from a realm beyond our own and are kind of all archetypes that we've come to know for a variety of reasons over the generations in popular fiction and literature, etc. And essentially, they have been imprisoned in order to get them out of this kind of forever war that's been going on amongst the immortals. I mean, how do you gain ground in a war against an immortal when the immortal can just keep coming back, right? Or can be brought back. And so someone realized, oh, hey, well, instead of, killing immortals so they can just get brought back by their people and stuff, what if we just imprison them somewhere? And so that prison was a barren planet. Spoiler alert, it's here, Earth. And the prison cells are life. And so these 5 being bound to Earth and trapped here for the last, several hundreds of thousands of years is what sparked life, or a version of life anyway. And then over the generations, what you see here actually on the screen, this is the front of the wraparound cover for issue 1. These are all different lives that our main character Christopher, who's the split image, has an association with, I guess I would put it. And so our first cover, it was actually a really cool idea from Dan Panosian and Declan Shalvey to build this out this way. So it's actually a jam piece. Felipe Watanabe drew the main Christopher image. And then to the right, we have Dave Johnson drawing Joseph Stalin. We've got Nicola Scott drawing Queen Elizabeth I, and Declan doing the samurai leader, whose name I can never pronounce. And then to the left of this, what we're not seeing here, we have, let's see if I remember this, we have Rod Reese doing Abraham Lincoln. We have Tula Lotay doing Cleopatra. And then we have Dan Panosian doing Eric the Red.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So when you're planning out characters like this that have lived so long and lived so many lives, first of all, how complicated is that? What is the map like on your wall when you're keeping track of them? And then how do you keep them consistent over the different decades?
Well, the good news is that, as I said, these are archetypes. So as far as keeping things consistent, in some ways, it's a little easier because the personalities, maybe not the personalities, the lives that I'm choosing to reference are all kind of, there's a commonality that we are drawing between them from an archetypal standpoint. But as far as the planning, I mean, I've been talking about this, the more interviews we've done. I've been working on this book for like 10 years.
Wow.
So this was like the first book I pitched Image, and like I pitched Eric Stevenson in like 2011. And it was originally, it was when I was doing Deathstroke for the New 52. So it was Joe Bennett, Art Taber, Jason Wright, and myself doing Deathstroke. And we got fired after issue 8. And the creative team, we were just having so much fun. It was like, oh my God, like I even knew then it was my second ongoing series, but only second in that, like Nightwing had come out first, I think, right. But I was doing them at the same time. But even then I could recognize like, this is like a murderer's row of like, wow, like this is what it feels like to have like a well-oiled machine. And so I started trying to figure out like, okay, what's an original that we could build, that we could all do together. And just playing to the strengths of Joe and his storytelling and what he liked drawing, some of the action stuff and everything. And so that became, I just basically kind of developed this idea of the immortal warrior, kind of a new take on the reincarnated immortal warrior. And then it didn't work out with Joe and Art and Jason. And so I started building it for a different artist, and then that didn't work out, and then built it for a different artist, and that didn't work out, and then built it with Felipe. And the thing kind of through all of that, the constant was like, I can look back on it now, I can say like, I wasn't ready. Like, there were things there were certain things in the art side of things where, again, like the fits didn't work, just logistically and everything, timing wise and whatnot. There were a couple art teams that, we did an entire issue 1 with someone, and it's beautiful. But the schedule didn't work to do it going forward, but there was also a big part of me that was like terrified. Like I'd built this idea and I was like, oh, I'm not good enough to write this. Like, and it took doing a whole lot of books and, a lot of creator-owned books. And honestly, something like Power Rangers, the big Shattered Grid event, it took me doing that to go, okay, I think I could do this now.
What I really like about go ahead. Were you going to say something, Pete?
I was just going to say, well, I'm glad it kind of all came together because we read a ton of comics, but like when the kind of idea snaps in, it's such a kind of like, oh shit moment of like, you realize the scope of what you're trying to do in this book. And the art comes together in the writing style in such a awesome way. It's just, it was an absolute pleasure to read. So thank you. I'm sorry it took 10 years to make, but man, it's worth it. When you read it, you can really tell that like a lot of heart went into this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. It's a weird one in that, I wrote the first issue. I actually don't remember. Like I wrote the first draft of it probably 6 or 7 years ago, but then it changes and then you don't touch it for a while and you come back to it. And then of course, like it's interpreted differently by each artist and then, or it would be anyway. And then the lettering pass is like, oh, I kind of remember writing this. Hold on. I wouldn't write that now. Let me rewrite this. And so it's this weird kind of like fusion of a lot of different kind of eras of my life, which is a very kind of strange, surreal experience because you don't realize you're out of an era until you look back and suddenly there's a pane of glass separating you from it. And something like this is very much there are several panes in this in this window.
Well, to that point, without getting too much into spoilers, and I think it's something that became more clear when I read the second issue, again, that comes out tomorrow for anybody listening, is it really feels like, in a good way, this comic is front-loaded. Like, there's so much information that you pack in that first issue. It's so wide, it's so broad in scope, and then you zone in with this very hardcore action sequence. It isn't really until the second issue that we get, okay, here's what's going on. Here's how maybe I haven't read beyond the second issue, but maybe how the comic is going to work. So what was important to get across and do in that first issue when you finally sat down to craft it?
Yeah, that was something that was very, very kind of at the forefront for me. Even before the example I'm about to use, but I didn't want to do the thing where the premise is really baked in as a twist at the end of the first issue. And I've done that before and I love doing that. But it's really, really, really hard to do. The book that Matt Groom's first book, Self-Made, that I was the editor on a couple years ago, we had that problem in that the true premise of the book is a twist at the end of issue 1. And it's really cool. And it makes the reading experience awesome, but it makes promoting the book impossible.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be careful with something like that with Ordinary Gods, but also, and part of this also probably speaks to where I was in my life and where I was in my career when I started the project. I don't assume I have any runway, for people's attention. Like I can't do a long, or I didn't think anyway, I really could do a long drawn out, kind of slow revelation of what exactly this is, So I felt like it behooved us to hit it early, hit it kind of on the nose if need be. Because the premise is, what's weird is the premise is challenging to convey in an efficient way, and in a way that's like easy to digest and understand. But it's also not the most interesting thing that the book's going to be exploring. So it felt like let's just get it out there, like up front. Let's talk about it in interviews, in the press, in solicits, and the promise of the premise is what we're gonna be doing after these first couple issues. So, I mean, we're looking to end the world, right? I mean, that's
just a little thing, just a tiny little thing.
Yeah, nothing less.
Since you have been planning this for 10 years, about how far do you have it planned out beyond that first issue at this point?
It's pretty sufficiently planned out. And we're going to be announcing something pretty soon. I would say it now, but I don't want Kat to kill me if we have plans for it. So, but there is some stuff coming up that I'm going to be announcing with regards to like. It's tough to say, but the trajectory of the book and what. Yeah, I mean, it's a big. There is significant scope behind what we're looking to do.
All right,
I will put it that way.
I'll put that in my pocket and save it for later, whenever it's coming out. I did want to ask you about Radiant Black as well.
Yes,
we've been loving that book so much here on the show, and this is one. It's interesting to hear you talk about putting those twists in the first issue because it feels like they come out almost every single issue. Like you're kind of leaving it all on the table every time. For those who haven't read the book, and tell me if I'm describing anything wrong, but basically it's a down on his luck writer kind of bumming around, finds a mini black hole, touches it, gets these powers, and gets embroiled in something way bigger than himself. That's where it sort of starts, and it starts in, we've compared it a lot to Invincible on the show, I think, at least sort of as a touchstone where it begins, but it goes so far afield in these first couple of issues, things change dramatically. What was kind of the MO behind that? What was important to get out in this book?
Well, I've been lovingly referring to the book as Power Rangers for adults. And I always have to qualify that though, because even that's reductive. Like Power Rangers is for more than children. Like I'm not implying that Power Rangers is not for adults. What I'm actually trying to say is like, this is Power Rangers if they had adult problems. Like, he's $38,000 in credit card debt and chased his dreams, and he's 30 and shit hasn't worked out so far, and just the very idea of this generation that I am a part of, that I don't know. I feel like we're the last generation to be sold the idea of the American dream in the way, shape, and form that it has been presented for a whole lot of years. And it's just like, we're just doing the best we can, these paths in life that were, I don't know about you, Sal, but like, sorry, not to separate us generationally. I shouldn't presume here.
Well, Pete and I are both 16 years old, but
right. Yeah. So you guys, you know what? I think it's actually going to be easier for you because you're way more malleable about where to create for and what, the gig economy and things like that.
Pete's on TikTok a lot.
I don't know what a Snapchat is. Okay. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so I'm saying all of this tongue in cheek, but a lot of this stuff is what was behind some of my interests in building out what became Radiant Black, and it's also something that based on my experience with Power Rangers and then Ultraman and certainly my kind of growing love of things like Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. There it is.
Took me a second.
When basically Eric Stevenson texted me one night and said, "Hey, have I ever asked you about building an original superhero?" And I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, not like, a Batman or Superman analog, but like something original, like contemporary, like optimistic sci-fi. And I was like, well, I would kill to do that, but I assumed there would never be a market for something like that. And he's like, no, I think there would be. And he's reminded me since that we actually talked about this at Emerald City in like probably, 2017, maybe something like that, 2018.
Wow.
And I completely forgot about it. Yeah, the idea of like building a new superhero for kind of contemporary times, And then to your point about a lot of the twists and the reveals and things like that. That's something I feel a really big sense of responsibility for and about. There's a lot of comics on the stands, and there are a lot of superhero comics on the stands. But there aren't a lot of superhero comics where truly anything can happen.
Right.
And I feel like there also aren't a lot of superhero comics where the creators are empowered or allowed to make anything happen. Right.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on Marvel DC books whatsoever. I've written a ton of them. I'm writing Darkhawk right now for Marvel. But I do feel like if you're going to bring out a new superhero book, especially, you better do something. You better do something interesting, and you better take some big swings. And honestly, with Radiant Black, this first arc, like this was our first at bat in our first game. Like you have no idea. Like you have no idea the stuff we've like. And I'm so sorry if that sounds arrogant. I really don't mean it to. Like we've just been planning a lot. I mean, that's all I do. Like, I don't have a life. Like, I just work. Like, this is all I do. So, there have been a lot of, and Michael, my editor and designer, is in Australia. So when I'm asleep, he's awake, and it's all he does. So it's just a 24/7 cycle of ideas and planning. And, if you like Radiant Black, you should probably follow the @BlackMarketNAR account. Especially on Friday. You should probably make sure you're following that account.
And just to keep harping on this one part of it, I know I called out Invincible before, but I think
I love Invincible.
So
please,
good.
I will take that any day of the week.
Well, the reason we keep bringing it up when we review it, and we've talked about, I think, every issue on our Stack podcast so far, where we review the comics, there's these twists that are sort of like people talk about the 12th or I think it's the 12th or 13th issue of Invincible, the one with the big reveal that I won't spoil in case anybody hasn't read it yet. But it feels like that sort of thing comes every issue here. But also what you're really bringing is this emotional intensity and this heart to every issue that also reminds me very fondly of that comic. But the thing that I've been really impressed about and that has diversified it from that initial feel of young hero getting powers and he's trying them out, just to like plug I think it was the last issue, it followed a different character in a different art style, and that in and of itself feels like its own big swing to, I think that was the 6th issue of the book. To do that there, that's pretty bold to what you're talking about, to take a young comic with a new audience and be like, nope, we're going to totally shake it up 6 issues in.
Yeah.
You just sounded so nervous right there.
No, it's something, I mean, it's calculated, but it's also something that, so it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I very much feel that readers come to creator-owned books for the creative team. They're not coming for the character. You're not reading, I mean, pick a book for that. It's not like Batman. Like it's not like, readers will follow characters when it's Marvel, DC, etc.
Yeah.
Or some readers will. On a creator-owned book, like if so-and-so's not doing the art, if Tony Daniel's not drawing that issue of Noctera, like, is it the same? Right? Like that's the dilemma you have as creators. So what do? Okay, well, you can build your schedule to take a month off or take 2 months off, like the Saga model. And that works for a lot of creators, and it certainly worked in the past. For me, I look at that and it's like, I've done it. And it's nice because you can catch your breath, but you're also off the stands for at least a month.
Right.
And on the one hand, yes, letting retailers know as long as you let retailers know when you're coming back, it's like it's okay. except out of sight is out of mind, especially in a crowded marketplace. So you don't want to be off stands. But the monthly publishing model, with the level of and the complexity and the sophistication of art that we have in this day and age, like it's a really, really, really tough model to do true monthly. So when I was doing Power Rangers, I helped kind of build, I don't want to say the publishing model, but the narrative model for publishing. So they wanted to do like, I think 4-issue trades or something like that. And so every 5th issue we did a one shot, and that's what it was. Hendry Persetia wasn't able to do a true monthly. And so we decided that we would basically do, I basically built it so that every 5th issue was a character focused one shot that either answered or reversed or recontextualized something that we did in those first 4 issues. So it always felt narratively important and significant, even though you could probably classify it as a fill-in. On the creator-owned side of things, when there aren't existing characters, because even Power Rangers, you can go like, sure, we can get different artists to do each issue. People are going to read it because it's Power Rangers. Well, on Radiant Black, that's not the case. And so I started looking at like, how do we do something like this that is both A, narratively exciting and makes sense, but B, is artistically exciting and makes sense. And it's really a testament to Marcelo and Michael and Becca. The entire aesthetic and visual style of the book is something I'm incredibly proud to be a part of. It's also made it a little easier when reaching out to artists, because they can see not only the book, but the social, like things like that of like, oh, this is all really, it's really on point. It's all well designed. Like the suit looks good. Like Marcelo's art is really crazy great. Like the design is really contemporary and really, really slick. And so when I reached out to one of my all-time favorite artists, David Lafuente, well, I guess he goes by Darko now, David Darko Lafuente, and said, is there any shot you'd have time to do an issue? He had already seen the book, and this was like a month after it announced. It wasn't even out yet. And so we were able to start talking that way. And to me, like, again, he's one of my all-time favorite artists, on top of the fact that, like, I feel like in the case of a superhero book, if you can get people of the caliber and the talent level as David, as David Finch, who did a great cover for our first issue, Goni Montez, Daniele Di Nicolo, we've just had murderer's row of talent doing covers. I feel like it helps validate the character as well within the market,
Yeah.
So that's what's behind. That's the long-winded answer.
Well, it's great because, you're hitting on something culturally speaking that I think the modern comic book reading audience is looking for. I think it targets on why Invincible was so revolutionary, or why it's so beloved, why like people vehemently defend or love Invincible so badly. It's because it's a universe where it's a contemporary character that represents a generation that also anything can happen to. The stakes are unknowable, and it's only on the whims of the creative team, which of course speaks to the success of Radiant Black, because it's touching on something culturally that is a shift in the comic book reading audience, which is they want stakes. They want the character to matter. They want things to impact that character. They want to also be on the ground floor of that character and their journey. So, I think that speaks to the success.
No, thank you. Also, sorry, I got distracted literally by a fire well, not literally a fire, but I literally got distracted by a proverbial fire on Radiant Black.
Oh, wow. Oh, all right. Well, that probably is a good note to wrap up on, that so you can put out that fire. But what else do you want to plug, if anything, Kyle?
Well, I want to plug whatever feature Sal and I are going to do for ComicPop Returns over here.
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to do something? You guys are hearing it here in chat for the first time. We're going to, yeah, you tell me, and I'll be there for it.
All right, I'll call you. I'll have my people call your people, which is to
see,
say,
we're making connections. I love
you.
this.
But yeah, I've got well, there's Radiant Black, there's Ordinary Gods, which is out tomorrow. Ordinary Gods #2, and then I would say, like I said, pay attention. I would pay attention to the @Black Market NAR account this week, especially on Friday. I mean, if you like cool stuff. If you don't,
Yeah,
you don't have to.
it, but thank you.
And then I think more will kind of come to light then, as far as kind of what I've been up to and what my 2021 is very quickly shaping up to be.
Awesome.
Cool.
And Sal, what about you? What should people check out?
Well, as Kyle so succinctly put, we launched a new channel. It's called ComicPop Returns. That's where we do interviews and like with good people like Kyle, who I'm sure we'll see again. Speaking presumptuously, but no, we do live shows over there and comic book discussions, and of course over on youtube.com/comicpop you can subscribe and check out our long-winded analyses and discussions of full trades or stories and everything else therein. So hopefully you'll check us out.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Have a great night.
You guys too.
Take care.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
All right. Once again, that was Sal Crivelli from ComicPop. You can check out ComicPop Returns. And Kyle Higgins, Ordinary Gods and Radiant Black are both out from Image
Two
Comics
amazing
right now.
properties.
Absolutely amazing. And folks, we're going to move on with our next section, which is my favorite section because you all make it up. It's your audience questions. And for audience questions, all you need to do is drop a question either in the comments section over on YouTube. It can be about absolutely anything, and we will check it out there, or on Crowdcast and ask a question. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Oh.
You like that? Attention, listeners across the galaxy, all the way from Australia to Houston. Do we have a pube problem? If so, our friends at Manscaped have cleared you for takeoff with their 4th generation and brand new Lawnmower 4.0. Kick your pubes to the next planet with the Performance Package 4.0. The orbits in your pants will feel like you're in zero gravity when you use the best tools for the job for the leaders in male grooming. Join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get your rocket ready for takeoff by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with code FANSIDED20. Inside this package, you'll find their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold your whole solar system. Pete,
Wow.
you going to stuff your whole solar system in that bag?
I hope so, man. I hope they send it to us. But yeah, Justin loves the underwear, so
He does, and you love the Manscaped, the Lawnmower 4.0, right?
4.0. Yeah, I've used that. It's great. The light is super helpful.
That's great.
And
You
doesn't
can use
hurt
it
your
to
nuts.
find your keys. Oh, it doesn't hurt your nuts.
Yeah,
They should put
which
that
is
on the
important.
package.
Yeah.
I hesitate to ask, but I have to ask now. Were you using razors that hurt your nuts?
There are some that are more well built than others.
Mm-hmm.
It's like kind of like those razors used, those electrical razors on your face when they first came out. They would pull a little bit and they would kind of hurt.
Well, and you
but yeah.
used to use a old piece of glass, right, that you found in an alleyway?
Exactly, yeah. Or when I
good.
just break my empty bottle that I've been drinking out of,
Finish up your Petey Palmer, break the glass, just go
just,
to town.
Yeah, just shave my face, yeah.
Great. I'm glad they hired us for this ad, and I'm sure they're glad as well. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code FANSIDED20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code FANSIDED20 at manscaped.com for a clean trinity and beyond. Your Spaceballs will thank you.
Spaceballs the flamethrower.
Yes. Let's move on to questions. Again, if you have a question about absolutely anything, comics, TV, movies, love life, whatever you want, drop it in the comments over on YouTube or ask a question here on Crowdcast. We'll go here. This ties into our ad. This is from Edward Doherty. If Manscaped was a comic character, what would his origin powers be? And what type of villains would be in his rogues gallery? And how would Alan Moore deconstruct these tropes later on? It's funny, actually, when we first signed up to do the Manscaped ads, it was Alan Moore's Performance Package 4.0, but then he took his name off of it.
Yeah. Which is tough because we were all on board because Justin knows Alan Moore.
Well, he he used to co-host the Watchmen podcast with us, Watchmen Watch.
Yeah.
So we knew him very well. He wasn't able to make most of the episodes of Watchmen Watch, but he promised us he was going to come for the Manscaped ad, and then it didn't. No dice.
Didn't work out. Yeah.
But what do you think? What kind of comic character would Manscaped be? What would his origins and powers be?
I don't know, man.
You're too forgot at this point.
I think it's just, somebody who likes to keep things clean. You know what I mean? Just likes
keeps it fresh.
Keeps it fresh.
Yeah,
keeps it
he'd
trim.
probably have shaver hands, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that would be going on. And he'd probably have he'd have a lot of pockets, Rob Liefeld style.
Yeah, probably.
Edward says his arch ought to be Escaped Man. I think we'll go with that.
Great.
There we go. That works. This is from Kevin. What's your favorite example of a joke character that's made serious and or awesome either in another medium, like Polka Dot Man in the Suicide Squad, or in later runs like Kite Man in Tom King's run? Kite Man is a great example, which you never liked, right?
Yeah, Kevin, if you're going to ask us a question, then answer it better than we could answer, I mean, it kind of takes the fun out of it, because anything after what you said.
Why don't you run the show?
Yeah, anything after that just sounds dumb. Yeah, Kite Man's a perfect example, because I hated Kite Man, and then Kite Man won me over.
Well, here's the thing, though, we should clarify, is you didn't like Kite Man in Tom King's run.
Right.
You only liked Kite Man on Harley Quinn, the animated series, because it was played by our friend Matt Oberg.
Well, also, it wasn't just the Oberg of it all. I mean, Oberg really brought something to it that was magical. Yeah. I mean, he was kind of perfect for that. His kind of improv style is kind of over it, so it worked out perfectly. But I think that it's just one of those characters where it's really about the perspective and really about what you're doing with the character, where you have just somebody silly all the time, like a Plastic Man or whatever. There have been some runs where you can put some heart behind it, add some seriousness, and you've got a different kind of character, different tone to that character, which can add some depth. But yeah, I was impressed with the different choices that they made with Kite Man that kind of will open me up to the possibility of this character.
Well, I mean, I'm surprised Kevin didn't say this in the question, because I feel like this is his go-to anyway, but Squirrel Girl is the first one that comes to mind.
He loves to bring up Squirrel Girl.
Loves Squirrel Girl. I love Squirrel Girl too, and I love the joke of Squirrel Girl initially that was like, well, I beat Thanos. How did I do that? That happened off panel. That's a great joke. And what everybody did with it, particularly Dan Slott, what he did with her was fantastic and super fun. But the fact that they took a joke character and kept the humor and kept the heart there, or at least added in heart and a lot of intelligence in Ryan North's run in particular, is great. It's really good, and it really elevated the characters to something different beyond that one joke premise that is really, really impressive. And Kevin says here, it was hard for me to not say Squirrel Girl, so hard. I could have said it. We got a question here over on YouTube from Brandon Daniels. Says, have you read any of the new Milestone books? And if so, what are your thoughts? I liked Static and loved Icon and Rocket. Pete, I know you're a fan of the Milestone stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very happy right now that they're kind of giving us a kind of new run of that right now. Excuse me, Dracula is about to enter my building, apparently.
Very cool.
But I'm excited that we're getting some new number ones with that. And we'll be talking about one of them in the stack. So,
well, you can talk about it, Pete. It's out on stands because it's a DC book.
Oh, right.
So Hardware Season 1, number 1 came out today, which I know you liked quite a bit.
Yeah, I really love the art style. It's a great kind of retelling of a kind of a classic DC character, and I hope it gets a lot of traction, and hope it does well, because there's a lot of different characters out there, and I feel like if we kind of use them right and use them well, we can say a lot more than what we're using.
I'm really curious to see what happens beyond these first issues for these titles, because I think they're all good. They've all been really solid, but they're very much at least part recap, getting everybody caught up to speed with, hey, this is what the character is. This is what they stand for. You haven't read them in a really long time, but here's what's going on with them. So I'm excited to check out second issues of any of them and see how the characters progress potentially, because I think that'll be really the proof of their long-standingness. That was not a word. I don't know what I'm talking about. This is from Stray Bullet. Have you guys ever come up with your own comic characters for fun? And if so, who were they and what was their origin? Great question. Do you have one, Pete? You did your own comic.
Yeah, I did my own comic for a little while. But I also, when I was a little kid, I used to draw comics kind of about my struggle a little bit, and it was called Peewee. And it was really short, but he had a little propeller hat. Remember those old little propeller hats? So he could like fly up and punch tall people in the face.
Oh, very nice. Very similarly, the only one that I can think of is I had a character named Super Buggy that I created, who had 2 big eyes and a nose and a little bug body and wings, and I draw him all the time, and he would just, I don't know, I don't even honestly know what his powers are, other than I was able to draw him very well, and he was one of the few things I was able to draw very well, and very simply, so I think he flew, and that was pretty much it. But there you go. Both of those are coming out on Substack, I believe, next week.
Yeah, as soon as our deals go through.
Yeah, this is from Nelson Martinez. Big Harley Quinn fan. I loved her in the new Suicide Squad movie. Looks fed to your review. Who is your guys' favorite portrayal of her character, and also which version of Harley do you like best? So I'll mention, I assume people have checked it out, but if not, in the Comic Book Club feed, we put up a dedicated The Suicide Squad, review podcast over the weekend, so you can check that out. But Pete, best Harley Quinn of all time. This is a tough one, I think.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm going to go with the animated series.
Kelly Cuoco.
Yeah, I just think that the Harley Quinn has got heart. She tries to do what's right, which is great about her. The animated series really kind of brought that to play, but like, it's also fun to see her mischievous side. Her I don't play by the rules, which is fun, and Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti do a great job with that, and they have a lot of fun with her as a character. But yeah, for me, it's really been the animated stuff so far. Although the stuff that James Tynion is doing right now is also very enjoyable.
Well, and you're a Big Bang Theory fan, right? So you're like, oh, it's Penny's voice. It's Penny from the Big Bang Theory. I love her on that show.
Yeah,
Bazinga, right?
Yeah.
Pete? This is a really tough one. A couple of people in the comments said Arlene Sorkin, Bruce Timm's all the way. I think design-wise, yes. I love the old Harley Quinn costume. I'm a huge fan of that. Huge fan of her on Batman, the animated series. Yeah. But I think as a character, they have done an incredible job of moving beyond that initial Joker's girlfriend dichotomy that she was stuck in, and letting her really grow and change. We were talking about this on the Suicide Squad review, but this mini arc that she's had over the course of the first Suicide Squad movie to Birds of Prey to now in the Suicide Squad is so impressive. Same thing in the comics, where she just moved away from this and become her own character. And also in the, like you were saying, in the animated series, Kelly Cuoco's character on HBO Max, also just great. Like, a lot of that is still about the Joker and her relationship with the Joker, but I think particularly where she ends up at the end of season 2, we're going to see more of that. And that's good. The character's changed, and I think the modern version of her, the place where she is now, versus, say, kind of like the Arkham City era, when it was just all, I'm still Joker's girlfriend, but I'm wearing a tiny costume. That irked me, but I think they've reclaimed that, and a lot of that, to your point, came out of Jimmy Palmiotti's and Amanda Connor's run, which really built up the character in a really fun way and made her, this is reductive, but DC's Deadpool in a certain way, So that's a long way of saying I don't know. I think there's things to be said for all of them.
Hey, you couldn't just say I don't know. You had to be like, no, I know about this character. Let me show you.
I should give a TED Talk on that. And at the end of the TED Talk is, in conclusion, I don't know. Here we go. We got one last one over here on YouTube. This is from Ramsey Hassan. Which MCU director would you guys like to see canceled and then make a DC film, and which DC title? This is riffing off of course, James Gunn, the fact that he was canceled for his tweets, fired from Marvel, went over to DC, and now is coming back to Marvel to do Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Who would you like to see, I guess, make the leap to DC? I feel like we've answered this one before.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to see this person canceled, but I would love to see what Favreau would do over at DC. That would be very interesting.
Maybe you can make like Chef, but in the DC universe or something like that.
Hey, man, that sounds delicious.
I feel like I'm trying to remember what we said the last time. I guess that doesn't matter. Taika Waititi could probably do whatever, and that would be great. I think that would be fun to see him take on something. I feel like I mentioned this before, but like Peyton Reed on Shadow Pact or something would be very fun as well. I don't know. That would be cool. This is one last one. This actually is not a question, but I'll use it as a chance to plug. How long can you make a name? Says What If premiered tomorrow. Why, it does indeed. It premieres at 3 a.m. on Disney Plus.
Let's get up early for it.
Let's get up early. We're going to have a What If podcast go up in the Marvel Vision feed at 3 a.m. in the morning. So everybody go watch What If, and then the podcast will be right there for you in the Marvel Vision podcast feed, so you'll get to see our breakdown of the full first episode.
Get ready. It's emotional. I got choked up in the first step.
Yeah, well, you got choked up. You got choked up about everything.
It's emotional stuff, that What If.
It is. All right, and that is it for your audience questions. Woo-hoo. Next up, it is time for trivia, and for that, I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Pete LePage.
All right. This is the part we give back to you, the lovely audience. It's an opportunity to win $25 free in the form of a gift card to Midtown Comics online. Because if you had $25, you would go to a comic book shop. So all we need is a first hand up.
Yeah, so I'll mention we don't have a volunteer this week. I'm going to drop a link into the chats. But if you want to win $25, all you got to do is either say hand up in Crowdcast or in YouTube. You will answer 3 easy questions. Just say yes, me, or something like that. And then we will give you $25 is basically how it works.
That's right.
But anybody, absolutely anybody. This is my favorite part of the show when we kind of do it like this.
Where we're doing
how long can you make a name? Says the answer is C. It sounds like a volunteer to me.
It does.
It does. I'll tell you what. How long can you make a name? You've been so great at chatting. All you got to do is drop some answers in the chat. You're definitely going to get this. Pete, take it away.
Okay. Today's trivia is on topical comic news and a small nod to the legend Marquee Post. Rest in peace. Please listen to all 3 options before making your selection. So here we go. Question number 1. Who announced a big deal with the Substack platform? And if you were paying attention, we did mention this person's name. Is it A, Scotty Young, B, Jackie Young, or is it C, Young at Heart, Jeffrey Tambor? So it's either A, if you would like $25, or you can pick something that's wrong.
Oh, you can pick something else. Also, thanks for bringing up Jeffrey Tambor, a controversial figure. Appreciate that. That's
oh, darn it! Didn't know that.
Do you want to do a quick sub out for anybody else?
Not prepared to do that, so no. Damn it, that's
so. What is it? You just need to potentially type A in the chat, and you get the question correct, right?
That's right.
Let's see. Let's see what happens. There's always a delay on YouTube.
Wow, so Kevin's already on it. Sub out Sarah Silverman. Yep. There we
Kevin
go, Kev. I should have done that. You're right, Kev. Should have done that. Let's see if Kev gets my other guesses. All right. I'm going to assume he says A, and let's move on.
Okay. All right. What's the second question?
Or they, I should say. I shouldn't assume. Here we go. Question number 2. Marvel announced the death of what character will make way for 3 new supervillains? Is it A, April Ross, B, Doctor Strange, or is it C, Keith David?
All right, so the choices are...
Wow. He called it but it was for the second one.
Wait, let's go back
third.
to the question. You're getting confused. So,
Okay.
First answer, A is...
April Ross, which you don't want, or it's B, Doctor Strange. What Marvel character will die
So
and
I would type B, is what you're saying. Like,
Yeah,
if I
that's
was
right.
How Long Can You Make a Name, I would type the letter B in the chat and then get it correct, right?
Exactly.
Interesting.
All right.
I guess we'll see what... Oh, you're assuming again?
We're assuming you got it right.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. We can't have that, Okay, here we go. Question number 3. What new Hickman series promises to burn the X-Men world to the ground?
Ooh.
Is it A, Nevin Harrison,
Okay.
B, Inferno series, or is it C, Brett Favre? So it's either A, or you could be correct and name it be Inferno series, which makes sense when you think about it because it said burned the X-Men world to the ground. Inferno series.
So A was Inferno?
No, B. So the correct combination would be A, B, B.
Okay. Let's see if How Long Can You Make a Name types B.
Yeah.
What was the secret movie in the meantime while we're waiting?
It was, Kevin is correct. It is There's Something About Mary. And there was also a sub one inside of this.
What?
Which is a shout out to U.S. Olympic gold.
Just the idea of U.S. Olympic gold?
No,
or...
Jackie Young won Olympic gold. So did April Ross.
Okay.
And Nevin Harrison.
Wow. Double quiz.
Doubled
Triple
it up.
quiz. Like a triple Lindy.
Yeah. Well,
Right, Pete?
I just thought it'd be a great. That's a nice ref.
All right. Tell you what,
just totally
How
fun.
Long Can You Make a Name? Correctly got it. So they are getting a $25 gift card to Midtown Comics. Just shoot us an email at comicbookclublive@gmail.com and we will get that right out to you. Now, before we wrap up here, new comics are cool. We like them.
Yep.
They're coming out all week. Pete, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm looking forward to Silver Coin number 5, as well as Detective Comics 1041.
Nice. Any particular reason why?
Well, even though Silver Coin has been insanely scary, it's still been very enjoyable and very creative, and the art's unbelievable. So it's won me over.
All right, fair enough. I am looking forward to Defenders number 1 is coming out tomorrow from Marvel.
Yeah.
That's written by Al Ewing, who is great, and art by Javier Rodriguez, which is amazing. So very excited to check that out. And another Marvel title, Runaways number 100, which is the last issue of the series.
You were gonna say that.
Well, I love Rainbow Rowell, one of my favorite writers. I'm reading her book, Wayward Son, right now, which is a lot of fun. So I'm bummed she's leaving the title, but excited to check that out. All of those books, are going to be in our Stack podcast that comes out tomorrow, 9 a.m., Wednesday morning, 9 a.m., both in the Comic Book Club feed and in its own dedicated Stack feed. And folks, that is it for this week's show. Couple of people we want to thank. We want to thank our amazing guests. We want to thank Sal Crivelli for coming on. Definitely check out ComicPop and ComicPop Returns. Nandor Fox Shaffer. Check out Man-Child on Kickstarter that's running right now. Kyle Higgins. Check out Ordinary Gods and Radiant Black, both from Image, both amazing books. Next week on the show, we're going to have
We should thank Justin for being here. He was a great host.
He wasn't here. Mark Crilley is going to be here to talk about his book, My Last Summer with Cass, and also Chad Sill, one of my children's favorite creators, is going to be here to talk about the Cardboard Kingdom, The Roar of the Beast. So maybe they'll be here to ask questions. I don't know.
That would be awesome.
I'll see what happens. It's pretty late for them. We'll see if it's past their bedtime.
We'll see.
A couple of other things to plug. As we mentioned, Marvel Vision, our Marvel podcast, is jumping right into What If, starting tomorrow, so you can check that out in the Marvel Vision feed. Also, Riverdale After Dark, our Riverdale podcast, finally back. We had a special episode that went up yesterday talking to the music producers of Riverdale, which was a super fun chat. But Wednesday, the show is back, so that is going to pop right after the show airs in the Riverdale After Dark feed. Also, Star Guys, our Star Girl podcast, is dropping in like 10 minutes.
Wow.
So get out of here. I can't believe we're taping both things at the same time. It's wild.
Go.
I don't know, but we're going to be dropping the premiere podcast for that. Patreon.com/Comic Book Club to support the show. iTunes, Android, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice to subscribe and listen at Comic Book Live on Twitter, Comic Book Club Live on Instagram, comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, good night.
Thanks, Justin's mom. But she listens to every show, remember?
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming on.